Hello everyone. I just wanted to make a short video about my thoughts on Dragons Dogma 2 after 100 hours of playtime. Dragons Dogma 2 is an amazing game. The combat, the world traversal, the combat mechanics, the game mechanics are very unique to this game and phenomenal at the same time. It's definitely something that I'd recommend experiencing yourself. However, the quest, the storyline, it didn't feel like it was fully fleshed out. The story started really strong. You're in this prison camp, you're a prisoner, you're doing some manual labor, then a monster attacks, and then you have to escape the prison. So you and another pawn jump off a cliff and onto a griffin's back, and then you just fly to the main city, which is an amazing way to start the game. And then in between that, it's kind of dull until you get to around the ending, and then you activate the true ending, and the end of the true ending was like, oh my god, that was so cool. The start of the game and the true ending in the game was awesome, and when you finally get to the top of Moonglint Tower, those are like the key moments that made the story actually enjoyable. But everything in between was kind of eh. It wasn't that special. I definitely think they could have improved that a little more, considering these are the guys that made like Resident Evil games, and Street Fighter games. You think they could have taken some tips from like the story from Resident Evil games and try and implement some of that experience into a game like this. But they took the formats from like the first Dragons Dogma, and they just tried to they just kept that old questing system from the first Dragon's Dogma, which is weird. They definitely could have improved significantly on that. The combat was really good in this game. When you play Warrior, your big sword, it felt really slow but really impactful and really powerful. When you played Fighter, you were just an absolute tank. When you were a thief, you could actually feel the difference in speed, and you just felt like an assassin when you're playing a thief. When you're a mage, the spells feel really powerful, really impactful when you actually hit them properly. And when you play the sorcerer, it's like, oh my god, the sorcerer has the most OP spells in the game that can just one-tap certain enemies and bosses. When you unlock these classes, it really impacts the gameplay in your fights against certain enemies and bosses. The Mystic Spearhand was an awesome hybrid class of a magic fighter class, or you can just air dash towards an enemy and like teleport places and like create an invincible shield on yourself and your team. The Mystic Archer was absolutely a great damage hybrid healer support class as well, doing insane range damage to enemies. The gameplay with the Archer felt really good as too, because when you play the Archer, you could just start fights from afar. Then you just have your pawns and your team just take him out as well, while you're popping people in the heads. The Trickster was fairly unique class as well, where you didn't really do damage yourself. You're mostly a class that caused fear and disrupted enemies, but you could like defeat bosses by like throwing them off cliff. You create fake walls and fake cliff sides here, so you could actually lure them off of these fake cliff sides with your illusions, and they could just fall into the water and die, or just take massive amounts of fall damage, and your team could just finish them off, which was a really unique class and fun to play as well. And the Warfare, you were able to equip any weapon you wanted. It had reduced stats, but the combat and mixing up the like strongest spells or strongest support spells you could creates a lot of variation. Unfortunately, I thought the Warfare would be significantly better. There was a mod for the Warfare that actually made it so it made the Warfare what people expected the Warfare to be. But the Warfare that is in the base game is very limited, because you're only limited to 3 spells or 3 skills, and you have a skill for rearmament, which swaps your weapon out. But the warfare could have been amazing, but someone did make a mod for that, and it's so cool seeing those mods. And it's like the mod for the warfare is something I wish was inside the base game, but it's not. It's whatever. There's mods. There's gonna be a modding community for this game eventually. You have a modding community just going out and trying to optimize the game so it runs at over 60 frames per second everywhere, and it improves graphics everywhere, and they're just getting to work on this, which is cool as well. So some of the fights with the monsters, there was unique experiences where you'd be fighting a big enemy or a pack of enemies, and then just a big enemy comes out of nowhere because you see a boss fight experience, like, oh damn. But unique experiences where you turn around every corner and you don't know what's going on. The unique experiences where you're fighting big fights, you're on your last legs, you're out of healing potions, your teams are like half health or something, and then suddenly a boss bar appears out of nowhere, and a griffin just lands on your team. Moments like that makes the game exciting and keeps you on edge for the game. Or something like you're already fighting a boss like a golem or something, and then a griffin just comes down and flies out of nowhere, or a dragon. Experiences like that made the combats and just traversing the world really cool. Enemy variation sucks though. There aren't too many enemies in the game. It's like the enemies in like the first section of the game in Vermund eventually gets reskinned or reapplied. So take the lizards. In the start of the game, you'll find lizards. You'll realize, like, oh, their weak point's their tail. But then eventually, they introduce a new lizard, which has rocks on it. So what does that mean? That means it is highly resistant to physical damage. So you have to figure out how to knock it over so you can hit its weak underside. And then it's like, oh, there's a magma lizard now. So a lot of the enemies definitely felt like reskins. You also had like the goblins in the first area. You'd find goblins, and then later on you just find the knackers, which is an advanced form of the goblins. And yeah, a lot of the enemies in the game feel like reskins. They definitely could have taken more of the enemy variations that they had in the original Dragons Dogma, Dragons Dogma Dark Arisen. And they could have at least put all of those enemies inside of Dragons Dogma 2, as well as all the new enemies, like the Sphinx, the Heartless Dragons, or Toxic Dragons, whatever you want to call them. And then when they eventually make it a DLC or expansion for this game, they could have added even more mythological creatures or giants, or more giant creatures, and added even more into that DLC or expansion for the game. But no, it seems like they're waiting until they release the DLC or expansion to actually add some more of the enemy varieties from the first Dragons Dogma into this game, which is a weird choice. People didn't seem to like that too much. The sound design for the game, it did its job pretty well. It wasn't astonishing, except for like the first part of the game, the first part of the storyline, and the very end of the game was absolutely amazing as far as sound design. In between here and there, it did the job. It was pretty good. It wasn't bad. Alright, the pawns. The pawns were a way for the community to try and engage with each other without actually being in co-op. The pawn system was in the original Dragon's Dogma, and they definitely tried to improve the AI, but there are some occasions where the AI just breaks on people. There are lots of clips about the AI just breaking, where they just, for some reason, they just jump off a cliff and all of them die, which that's honestly pretty funny. Sometimes you press the help button and they just don't want to help you. They're just busy. Or if all you have is a mage nearby and you have them trying to help you, they'll just keep healing you when you're being stun locked by something instead of actually hitting the enemy. And the pawn system allows the community to reward each other. So you can equip your pawn with a quest. If someone completes that quest, then they get a reward depending on what you were gonna give them. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes it's an item, sometimes it could be a super rare item. I've received port crystals occasionally, which is really cool. The pawn system is what they added into the game to try and get the community to engage in an indirect manner. So you can create a pawn, and someone else somewhere else in the world can use that pawn for themselves. And if your pawn is decked out with like the best gear and it's properly skilled and has the proper behavior components, your pawn can be really helpful and really OP. So trying to min-max your pawn to have the best behavior, the best stats, best equipment to fill a role in someone else's team is a great way to have an indirect way of player interaction inside of the community when you don't have to directly interact with other players. Dragons Dogma 2 is definitely one of those games where I was sad when it ended, which it doesn't always happen. Last time something like that happened was with Elden Ring. And after I finished the game for Elden Ring, I did a new game. I played it again. And that's what I did with this one. I played it again. But in that new game, there wasn't much to do, because the storyline, you already knew what happened in the storyline, so you're just skipping all the story stuff, just trying to progress to parts that you didn't see before in the first time. If you have not already purchased Dragons Dogma 2, I'd suggest doing some research on it. On console versions, the Xbox and PS5, the frame rate is locked to around 30 FPS. This may change with updates in the future, but it doesn't seem like it's going to change at all. I'm sure the console version is still fun, but with smoother frames is definitely more enjoyable, at least from my point of view. It's not going to break the game, but I find it more enjoyable to play on games that are above 60 frames per second, so consider that when thinking about buying this game. The PC version, I ran this game on an i7 with a NVIDIA 3070. When I tweaked the graphics, the game ran really good. I could not run ray tracing, but I could run at 60 frames per second most of the time. It was sometimes to 30s in certain instances because it's not properly optimized. But outside, when roaming the world, I was above 60 FPS pretty much all the time. Make sure you consider that when trying to buy this game. That is not fully optimized yet. This may change with updates, and there are modders attempting to fix and adjust this for lower end systems. Dragons Dogma 2 is definitely a memorable experience that you should really try for yourself. Would I recommend it at its full price right now? No, not really. I'd recommend playing it eventually, maybe on a sale, or maybe when the expansion comes out. Or if you haven't played the original Dragons Dogma Dark Arisen, try and get that game. It's pretty cheap and it goes on sale every now and then. If it's on sale, it's like $4 or $5. And Dragons Dogma 2 feels like it's what they wanted the game to be when they first released it in 2012. But they didn't have the technology, time, or funding to try and create their original vision. So they made Dragons Dogma 2 to try and complete that. But even though they did this, it still doesn't feel complete. It feels like maybe with an expansion or DLC or multiple DLCs, this will be more complete game, and that is my hope when they do release a DLC or expansion for the game. As far as the cash shop goes, just ignore the cash shop. Everything in the cash shop can be found in-game fairly easily. You don't need the cash shop at all. Anyway, that is all for me. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and follow, and I might see you in the next one. Peace out.